The sirens blared, echoing through the empty stretch of highway. Olivia Chase, gripping the wheel of her sleek black sedan, glanced in her rearview mirror to see flashing red and blue lights speeding toward her. Her jaw clenched. This wasn't how she planned to start her first day as the new chief of Darnell City's police department. She pulled over, the tires crunching against the gravel shoulder, and took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Two officers, stone-faced and swaggering with authority, exited their cruiser and approached her car. They moved with a casual arrogance, confident that the woman they were about to confront was just another driver who wouldn't push back. But they didn't know her. Not yet. The senior officer rapped on her window, his expression hardening when Olivia rolled it down. "License and registration," he demanded, his voice a low rumble. He glanced over her car, like he was searching for something, anything, to justify his interruption. Beside him, the junior officer, a man in his late 20s, couldn't quite hide a sneer. Olivia retrieved her documents with a calm that didn't match the fire simmering inside her. She had faced this kind of situation too many times to count. "Is there a reason I'm being pulled over?" she asked, her tone steady, masking the tension building beneath the surface. The younger officer leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Funny thing, ma'am," he replied, emphasizing the last word with mock respect. "We don't usually see folks like you driving through this part of town. You sure you're not lost?" Olivia's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. She could feel the challenge in his words, the underlying assumption. But she bit back a sharp retort, opting for a calm exterior. "No, I know exactly where I'm going." "Oh yeah," he shot back, that smirk of his widening. "And where's that?" She let a small smile curl at the edge of her lips. "You'll find out soon enough," she said, locking eyes with him. She could see the flicker of confusion cross his face, but she kept her expression cool. The senior officer, sensing things were heating up, decided to step in. "Let's keep this easy, all right? We can make things difficult if we need to." He straightened up, but Olivia caught the small twitch of his mouth. A power play, a thinly veiled threat. It was the last straw. Olivia exhaled, slow and measured, before speaking again. "Difficult?" "No, officers, I think you're the ones in for a rough day." She reached into her pocket, pulling out a sleek ID badge and flipping it open for them to see. "Chief Olivia Chase, new head of this department." For a split second, everything froze. The junior officer's smirk vanished, replaced with wide-eyed panic. The senior officer blinked, trying to process the bombshell she had just dropped. His mouth opened, then closed, the confidence draining from his face. You're the new chief," he stammered, the words stumbling out like they were tripping over themselves. "That's right," Olivia replied, her voice taking on a steel edge. "And now I'd like to know exactly why I was pulled over. And while you're at it, explain why you thought intimidating a citizen was a good idea." The senior officer cleared his throat, trying to muster some authority. "There must have been a misunderstanding, Chief Chase. We were just conducting a routine stop." Olivia's stare hardened. "Routine stop?" Funny, because it felt a lot like harassment. "And I've got a sharp eye for what's routine and what's not. Now, I'd like you both to think real hard about how you're going to conduct yourselves from now on, because this is your last warning." She let the silence hang in the air, watching them squirm. It was a power shift, as palpable as the rising sun that glinted off the windshield. The younger officer's face turned a shade of red as he muttered an apology, barely able to meet her gaze. The senior officer nodded stiffly, clearly realizing they had dug themselves into a hole far deeper than they expected. Olivia finally tucked her badge back into her coat. "You can return to your patrol now, officers. And I suggest you use the rest of your shift to think about why a simple traffic stop escalated like this. I'll be seeing you both in the department later." With that, she rolled up her window and drove away, leaving the two officers standing on the roadside, dumbstruck and shaken. The air in the police station was thick with tension when Olivia arrived. The place buzzed with murmured conversations, but they all fell silent as she strode into the room, her polished shoes echoing on the linoleum floor. She made a beeline for the conference room, where the department's officers were already gathered for her introductory meeting. All eyes followed her, some curious, others openly skeptical. a few glaring with barely disguised resentment. Olivia took her place at the head of the room, her gaze sweeping over the assembled faces. Among them, she spotted the two officers from that morning, their jaws clenched, trying to keep their composure. She made sure to hold their gaze for a moment longer before addressing the room. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady but firm. "For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Chief Olivia Chase, and today marks the beginning of some much-needed changes in this department." A few officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging glances. Olivia continued, her tone carrying an unyielding edge. "I know some of you might be questioning why I'm here, wondering if I have what it takes to lead this department. And that's fine. But let me make something very clear. My goal is to rebuild trust between the community and this force, to ensure that every single officer treats the people of this city with respect and fairness. That means accountability for each and every one of us, starting right now." A few murmurs rippled through the room, and one of the older officers, Sergeant Brody, leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. His skeptical smirk didn't go unnoticed by Olivia. "With all due respect, Chief," Brody drawled, his voice thick with sarcasm, "we've been doing things a certain way for a long time. Maybe you should ease into things before making any big changes." Olivia didn't flinch. She met his gaze head-on, her expression unyielding. "And maybe, Sergeant, it's time that certain way of doing things changed. I'm not here to maintain the status quo. I'm here to fix what's broken, and that starts today." Brody's smirk faltered, and he shifted in his chair, realizing this wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. Olivia continued, turning her attention back to the room. "I've reviewed every incident report and complaint that's crossed this department's desk in the past year, and I know where the problems are. Some of you have been here a long time, and you think you can push back against change. But I assure you, that will not work. If you do your job right, you'll have nothing to worry about. But if you're caught stepping out of line, if you think you're above the law, consider this your notice. I will not hesitate to take action." A heavy silence settled over the room. Olivia let it linger, allowing her words to sink in, watching the subtle shifts in the officers' faces. Some, like Officer Daniels in the back row, seemed to nod with cautious approval. Others, including Brody and the younger officer from the traffic stop, looked like they were swallowing a bitter pill. "I know change is hard," Olivia said, softening her tone slightly, but not her resolve. "But I promise you this. If we get this right, if we work together, we can make this city safer for everyone, including us. I'm giving every one of you a chance to be a part of that change. Don't waste it." With that, she ended the meeting, turning and striding out before anyone could challenge her further. As the door swung shut behind her, she could hear the buzz of conversations erupting once again. But she didn't need to listen to know the tone. Surprise, resentment, maybe a grudging hint of respect. She knew she had stirred the pot, but that was the point. The game had changed, and she wasn't afraid to play hardball. The rest of the day moved at a relentless pace. Olivia set up a series of meetings with her department heads, going over the new policies she wanted implemented, stricter protocols for traffic stops, mandatory de-escalation training, and a full review of body camera footage on every incident. As she laid out her expectations, she could feel the pushback coming from some of her team, but she refused to budge. Later that afternoon, she sat in her office, going through a stack of reports when a knock at her door interrupted her. She looked up to see Rafael Torres, a community activist who had been one of her biggest critics before she took the job. His expression was guarded, but there was a curiosity in his eyes. "Mr. Torres," Olivia said, gesturing for him to sit. "I wasn't expecting you today." He remained standing, his arms crossed. "I just wanted to see for myself if all this talk about change was real, or if you're just another suit making promises." Olivia leaned back in her chair, meeting his challenging stare with a calm expression. "And what do you think so far?" Raphael studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Too early to say. But I hear you've been shaking things up. Some folks in the neighborhood are hoping you'll actually follow through. But others, well, let's just say they don't think you'll last." Olivia nodded slowly. "I've got my share of doubters, I know that. But I didn't take this job to make friends. I took it to make a difference. If that means pushing some people out of their comfort zone, so be it." Raphael's gaze softened slightly, and he took a seat. You're not wrong about the comfort zones. But it's not just the department that needs convincing. The community's been burned too many times. They'll need to see more than just words. They will, Olivia promised. I've got some plans in motion. Community outreach, transparent reporting on incidents, and an open-door policy for any concerns that come up. It's not going to be perfect, and it won't be fast, but I'm committed. For the first time, Raphael cracked a small smile. You got guts, Chief. I'll give you that. Let's just hope you've got enough to back it up when the heat's really on. She returned the smile, though hers was tinged with the weight of everything that lay ahead. I guess we'll find out. The next few weeks were a blur of tension and small victories for Olivia. The changes she implemented began to take root: new protocols, updated training sessions, and an increasing number of officers who seemed willing to embrace her vision for the department. But not everyone was on board. Rumors swirled in the halls about a petition to push for her resignation. Whispers of an internal revolt among the old guard. Olivia kept her head down and pushed forward, knowing that the real test would come in the field. And it came sooner than expected. The call came in just after dusk. Shots fired in the warehouse district near the river, a hostage situation unfolding in one of the old factories. Olivia was in her office, reviewing files, when the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio, urgent and frantic. Possible gang involvement. Multiple suspects, heavily armed. Hostages inside. Olivia shot to her feet, grabbing her jacket and heading straight for her cruiser. She sped through the city's winding streets, her mind racing with 1,000 scenarios. This was it, the kind of high-stakes situation that could either cement her authority or shatter it. She arrived on the scene to find a swarm of squad cars, officers crouched behind their vehicles, weapons drawn, and tensions running high. The factory loomed ahead, its broken windows casting eerie shadows across the pavement. Olivia spotted Sergeant Brody coordinating with a group of officers, his expression grim. When he saw her approach, his jaw tightened. "Chief," he said, his tone clipped, "we got a mess on our hands. 5 suspects inside, at least 3 hostages. They've barricaded the main entrance. We need to go in hard, take them out before anyone gets hurt." Olivia scanned the scene, taking in the tense faces of her officers, the sound of distant shouting from inside the building. Her instincts told her that a direct assault would be a disaster. The suspects were desperate and cornered. Storming the place would almost certainly put the hostages at risk. "We're not going in guns blazing, Sergeant," Olivia said, her voice steady. "I'm taking command of this operation. We're going to try and negotiate first, keep the suspects calm, buy some time. I want a sniper on the roof for backup and a team ready at the side entrance. But no one moves until I give the order." Brody's eyes flashed with anger, his face flushing red. "With all due respect, Chief, you're playing with fire here. These guys aren't going to talk. They're animals. We need to take control now, before they start executing those people." Olivia squared her shoulders, stepping closer to him, her voice dropping to a hard, unyielding tone. "This isn't a debate, Brody. I gave you an order. You can either follow it, or you can sit this one out. Your choice." For a moment, the air between them crackled with tension. Brody's hand twitched toward his radio, like he was considering defying her then and there. But Olivia didn't back down, holding his gaze with a cold, determined stare. Finally, he gritted his teeth and turned away, muttering into his radio to relay her instructions. Olivia took a deep breath, refocusing on the task at hand. She approached the negotiator's van, where a seasoned officer named Lieutenant Morales was setting up his equipment. Morales glanced up, his expression neutral but professional. "You really think we can talk these guys down, Chief?" he asked, adjusting his headset. "I think we have to try," Olivia replied. "If we rush and people die, let's make sure we exhaust every option first. Keep them talking, find out what they want, and give me updates every 5 minutes." Morales nodded, and Olivia moved back to her car, where she could see the whole scene unfold. She gripped the radio tightly, listening as Morales made contact with the suspects inside. Her heart pounded with every passing second, but she forced herself to stay calm, to keep her mind sharp. The lives of the hostages depended on her decisions. The first few minutes were agonizing. Morales managed to establish a shaky line of communication with one of the suspects, a voice that crackled with nerves and anger, demanding a getaway car and safe passage out of the city. The sound of shouting in the background hinted at growing panic among the hostages. Olivia kept her eyes trained on the factory, searching for any movement through the shattered windows. The minutes ticked by, each one heavier than the last. She could feel the weight of her officer's eyes on her, especially Brody's, waiting for her to slip up. Suddenly, the voice on the other end of the radio grew more frantic. "We're not playing games here," the suspect barked, his voice cracking. "We see any cops trying to sneak in, and the first hostage gets it." Olivia tensed, her mind racing. She could sense the situation slipping away, the desperation turning to rage inside the factory. But before she could react, the sound of gunshots echoed from the direction of the side entrance. Morales' voice came through the radio, sharp with panic. "Shots fired. They think we're moving in on them." Olivia cursed under her breath, scanning the perimeter. Through the shadows, she spotted movement. Brody and a small team inching toward the side of the building, their weapons drawn. "Brody, what the hell are you doing?" she snapped in her radio. "Fall back immediately. You're going to get those hostages killed." But Brody ignored her, barking orders to his team. "We're not waiting around to be picked off, Chief. I'm taking control." Anger surged through Olivia, but she knew she couldn't afford to let it cloud her judgment. If Brody went rogue now, it could turn the entire situation into a bloodbath. She needed to act fast. "Morales, keep him talking," she ordered. "I'm going in." She grabbed a vest from the back of her cruiser and sprinted across the open space toward the side entrance, her heart pounding in her ears. As she approached, she spotted Brody and his team taking cover behind a stack of crates. She slid in beside them, ignoring Brody's furious glare. "You're out of your mind, Chief," he hissed. "You want to get yourself killed? If you make one more move without my order, you'll be suspended before the night's over," Olivia shot back. "Now, shut up and cover me." Before he could protest, Olivia raised her hands and stepped out from behind the crates, walking toward the factory door with slow, deliberate steps. She kept her gaze on the broken windows above, where shadows shifted against the dim light. "Listen up," she called, her voice ringing out across the quiet night. "I'm Chief Chase, and I'm coming in to talk. I'm unarmed. I just want to help you end this peacefully. But if you hurt those hostages, I promise you, it's not going to end well." There was a beat of silence. Then a rough voice shouted from inside. "Stay back. Don't come any closer, or we'll shoot." Olivia kept moving, her hands still raised. "I know you don't want to hurt anyone. You want to get out of here alive, just like the people inside. But the only way that happens is if you work with me. Let's figure this out together. Just give me a chance to talk." She took another step forward, her heart thudding in her chest. The door creaked open slightly, and she caught a glimpse of a figure inside. A young man with wild eyes, his hands shaking around a pistol. His face was a mask of fear, the kind that comes from knowing you've made a mistake you can't undo. Just stay back," he shouted, but there was a tremor in his voice now. Olivia saw her opening. "I'm staying right here," she said, stopping a few feet from the door. "You don't want this to end with blood on your hands. Let's find a way out together. Tell me what you need, and I'll make sure you get it." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she stood just outside the door, her hands raised. She could see the fear and desperation in the young man's eyes, and she knew this moment could make or break everything. The air was thick with tension, the kind that could snap with the wrong word or sudden movement. "Look," Olivia said, keeping her voice steady, "nobody wants this to end in gunfire. You have people who care about you, right? You don't want them to see your face on the news like this. Let's find another way." The young man wavered, his grip on the pistol trembling. Behind him, Olivia could hear the muffled cries of the hostages, the frantic breathing of the others inside. She took a small step closer, careful not to push too far. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the window above. Brody, positioning himself with a rifle. Olivia's blood ran cold. She realized he was setting up for a shot, ready to take down the suspect if things turned south. "Brody, stand down," she barked into her radio, her voice sharp and commanding. "Enough talk, Chief," Brody's voice crackled back. "I've got a clean shot. One pull, And this ends now. No, Olivia hissed. You fire that shot, and we lose control. Do not. But it was too late. A gunshot rang out, cutting through the night air like a knife. The bullet shattered the window, whizzing past the young man's head and embedding itself into the wall. He flinched, his eyes widening with terror, and Olivia knew she had only seconds before he panicked. Without thinking, she lunged forward, grabbing his wrist and twisting the pistol out of his hand. They tumbled through the half-open door, crashing to the ground. Olivia's shoulders struck the cold concrete, but she managed to pin his arm behind his back before he could recover. The gun skittered across the floor, out of reach. The other suspects inside, seeing their leader disarmed and restrained, hesitated, their own weapons wavering. The hostages stared wide-eyed, frozen in fear. Olivia raised her voice, sharp with authority. It's over. Drop your weapons, and no one else gets hurt. This is your last chance. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. Then, one by one, the remaining suspects lowered their guns, letting them clatter to the floor. Relief surged through Olivia as officers swarmed in, taking the suspects into custody and freeing the hostages. The scene outside the factory was a whirlwind of flashing lights, reporters, and emergency vehicles. Olivia stood near the police line, watching as paramedics attended to the shaken hostages. Her adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, but she forced herself to stay focused. Brody emerged from the shadows, his expression a mix of frustration and something else, maybe grudging respect. He approached her, his jaw set tight. You could have gotten yourself killed in there, Chief. Olivia turned to face him, her eyes blazing. And your shot almost cost those hostages their lives. You disobeyed a direct order, Brody. There will be consequences. Brody's face flushed with anger, but he didn't argue. He knew he had crossed a line, and there was no denying that Olivia's approach had saved lives that night. He glanced over his shoulder, where the young man Olivia had tackled was being led into a squad car, his head hung low. You got your way this time, Brody muttered, his voice tight. But you're playing a dangerous game, Chief. Olivia stepped closer, her voice low but firm. I'm not playing a game, Brody. I'm doing what's right. If you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who's in the wrong job. She left him standing there, turning her attention back to the scene as officers began to clear out. She knew this wouldn't be the end of the tension between them. But tonight, she had proven herself, not just to her officers, but to herself. The next morning, Olivia called a meeting with the department's leadership team. The mood in the room was tense as she addressed them, recounting the events of the previous night in detail. Let's get something straight, she said, her voice carrying a steely resolve. I am the chief of this department, and when I give an order, I expect it to be followed. Last night, some of you made decisions that put innocent lives at risk. That cannot happen again. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. Brody sat near the back, arms crossed, but even he looked subdued, a shadow of doubt crossing his features. Olivia knew she had made an impact, and she intended to drive the point home. I don't care if you disagree with my methods, she continued, her gaze sweeping over the room. What I care about is keeping this city safe and making sure every one of us earns the trust of the people we're sworn to protect. If any of you can't get behind that, then I suggest you find another line of work. A heavy silence filled the room, but she could see the shift in some of their faces, uncertainty giving way to a cautious respect. The first seeds of change had been planted, and Olivia knew that while the road ahead would be long, she had made a crucial step in the right direction. Later that day, as Olivia prepared to leave the station, she found Rafael Torres waiting outside, leaning against the hood of his car. He straightened up when he saw her, offering a nod that seemed less skeptical than before. I heard about what happened at the factory, he said. Word on the street is, you kept your cool when things got bad. People are talking, Chief. Some of them think maybe you're the real deal after all. Olivia allowed herself a small smile, the weight of the past few days momentarily lifting. I appreciate that, Raphael. But I know one standoff doesn't change everything. No, Raphael agreed, his expression thoughtful. But it's a start, maybe the first of many. He offered her a handshake, a gesture that carried more meaning than words. Olivia took it, feeling the solid grip as a promise of support, however tentative. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. As she watched Raphael drive away, Olivia took a deep breath, gazing out over the city that had become her battleground. The challenges ahead were daunting, and the resistance from within her own ranks was far from over. But she had faced worse before, and she was ready to face whatever came next, because she knew that the fight to change Darnell City's police department was far from over. But now, for the first time, it felt like she wasn't fighting it alone. Olivia's actions during the crisis at the warehouse earned her a hard-won respect from some of her officers, while deepening the rift with others like Brody. But the experience solidified her determination to push forward, knowing that each small victory could become the foundation of larger change. The standoff may have ended, but the story of Olivia's battle to reform the department, and herself, had only just begun.